Okay, so we have started the recording of the session, and I'm sharing my screen now. Since yeah, so since my camera is not operational, because of which we have already spent this much time, we are not going to wait for it much longer. We'll just begin with the session, and maybe I'll introduce myself again next week. When I'll be visible. For now, let me just go for a brief introduction about myself. I am one of your teaching assistants for this particular course, that is Introduction to Professional Scientific Communication, which is being currently taken by Professor S. Ganesh. So I am also Professor Ganesh's student. I am his PhD student, and I am working at Department of Biological Sciences and Bioengineering at IIT Kanpur. So I have myself taken this course multiple times, and I have also taught it before. Yes, I have a decent understanding about it. So if there are any queries, I will certainly try to deal with those doubts and queries. And if I am unable to answer it right then, I will go back, read, or consult sir, and I'll definitely answer your queries eventually. Right? Yes. So for now, let's go on with the previous year assignments. Yeah. Let me also just give you a brief introduction about how we are going to deal with this course, or what are these particular sessions going to be about. So for the next 4 weeks, I have scheduled 4 sessions. Maybe I'll take an extra session, which will be a compilation or a revision of all these sessions at the end of 4 weeks also. And what we'll do in these 4 sessions is that you have been given course lectures by sir, right? So those are recorded lectures. Along with that, there will be 2 sessions, I think, in which sir will also take a live discussion. Apart from those course lectures and those 2 sessions, this will be a weekly kind of we will summarize what is talked about in that week's lessons. Also, what we'll do is we will solve some previous year questions so that it might help you solving this year's assignment, right? So this year's assignment is something we will not at all discuss during these sessions, because when these sessions are live, those assignments are also still going on, right? Their submission date has not passed till that time. We'll not directly discuss about them, because we don't want to give away answers. But these are some previous year questions which will be similar to those that are given this year also, or the concepts might be similar, or maybe 1 or 2 repeated questions also might come your way, right? So it will probably help you practice for your exam eventually, and also for you to perform better in your assignments. I'll divide the sessions into 2 parts. The first part will be this, wherein we will discuss the previous year questions. So I have previous 2 years question. I think there are 23 questions for me to discuss in this particular session. So that I'll do. Along with that, what I'll do is the second part of my presentation will be dedicated to basically going over the concepts that have been taught to you this week, right? And if I found that there was some concept which needs more explaining, I will do that. Also, this year's discussion forum has not been very active, but in the previous years, we often do get some questions or queries in the discussion forum, which we answer over there also. But those queries I basically include in the second part of the presentation, wherein your doubts also I try to clear in this live interaction. So having said that, it is really difficult because you cannot really see me right now because of this camera issue. But having said that, let us just begin with the first part of the session, which is the going through the previous year assignments. So the first question is, the scientific literature includes which one of the following? Research papers, scientific books, peer-reviewed online repositories for scientific reports, or all of these? Uh, yeah. So if we had a poll over here, it would have been really interactive. But since we do not have your Microsoft IDs, we were not able to add you into the teams directly. So what I'll do is, after reading the question, I'll just take a pause so that you can go through the question, and then we'll basically come to solving that question and discussing why the answer is what it is, right? So the answer to this particular question is all of these, right? So scientific literature, obviously, I don't know. There are multiple people in this particular session, right? So some of you might be undergraduate students or postgraduates, or sometimes we even have professors from my previous courses. I know that sometimes even professors we have in these courses, right? Because this is a broader course, so we do not really know your exact field, but you might have read it somewhere or heard it from somewhere or have experienced it already, that whenever you want to study literature about any particular topic, specifically scientific literature, for instance, if you want to gain more insight into Alzheimer's disease, right? So you will go on sites such as PubMed or Google Scholar, etc., right? What will you find over there? You will find research papers, right? Or there are some journals that you might seek after for reviews, right? So they have basically compiled whatever knowledge about that subject is that you are looking for, and you might go after that. So those are the peer-reviewed online repositories for these scientific reports, right? Also, there are scientific books. So books is the first part that all of us are aware of. There are multiple different kinds of books we have always studied, but research papers and peer-reviewed online repositories are newer when you come to the later stages of doing science or getting into this research field. So the answer for this was all of these. Yeah, so the literature then itself can also be divided into multiple different categories. It could be primary literature, wherein it only encompasses original research or new scientific discoveries, right? So, for example, somebody has reported that, okay, uh, somebody did a study and they said that, okay, we know that this drug, which is known as metformin, which was previously in the market for diabetes, can also be repurposed to this XYZ disease, some other disease, right? So that work they have shown that how they have what is the dosage of that drug that they have used, what is the outcome of that. So that will be an original research or a primary literature, right? So the immediate results of research activities are included in this kind of literature. Often it also includes analysis of the data that is collected in field or laboratory. For instance, if we want to know that what is the status of pollution in New Delhi, right? Water pollution in New Delhi. So what will happen? There will be multiple samples that will be taken from multiple parts of Delhi. They will be sampled and that will be reported, right? Such a report will also be a primary literature, right? So, for example, original research published as articles in peer-reviewed journals, dissertations, technical reports, conference proceedings, etc. Then comes secondary literature. Now, this will summarize and synthesize primary literature. Usually, they are broader and less current than the primary literature, right? For example, literature review articles and books, right? So, in this, like we discussed, there are original reports and there are then compilation of multiple similar reports, right? So, this will be more of a compilation. Then, since most of the information sources in the secondary literature basically contain extensive bibliographies, they can be useful for finding more information on a topic. Then comes tertiary literature, right? So this gives a very condensed knowledge or an overview of a lot of subjects, right? For example, encyclopedias, right? That is one of the most common examples. So this summarizes or condensed versions of the materials, usually with references to primary or secondary sources. So references is another thing that is always very important. So we will discuss how references work, how to reference properly, how to cite literature, how to seek after good literature in this particular course eventually, right? So usually, good place to look up facts or get a general overview of a subject. So examples of this are dictionaries, textbooks, handbooks, encyclopedias, etc. Right? So, coming to the second question, it is which one of the following is an example of oral communication? Right? Is it articles in the newspapers, or presentation in a meeting, or pamphlets for a new restaurant, or none of these? Okay. So I think this is also a simple one. It is very direct that the example of oral communication out of all of these is basically presentation in a meeting, right? For instance, right now I'm presenting a particular PowerPoint presentation to you, right? Even though you cannot see me, you can hear me, right? That is an oral communication. Also, it is a visual communication because you are also looking at the slides. If my camera was working, you would be looking at me explaining the slides also. Right, so it is an example of both visual and oral communication. Whereas articles in newspapers will only be visual because you will just be reading about it, right? It is not, somebody is not saying anything about it. Similar goes for pamphlets for a new restaurant, right? So, question number three is where do research ideas come from, right? So, is it from personal or professional experience, or literature, or theory, or all of this? So, what uh, like how are research ideas born is one of the topics that I have dealt with in the second part of the presentation also. I think we'll go more deeply into this over there. For now, the answer is all of these, right? Why? Because literature, definitely everybody would know that we have to read a lot about a subject to find out what is the knowledge gap that is still remaining in literature, right? And we will basically work on getting ideas or developing ideas to fulfill that knowledge gap, right? Similarly, theoretical knowledge is also important because again, we need to understand or have an understanding of what is already existed, the existing knowledge on the subject that we are going to target, in order to further extend knowledge to that. Then sometimes personal or professional experience also might be the genesis of a new idea. How is it possible? Because for instance, just consider that uh, somebody a long while ago might have been using um, their bare backs and just their hands and legs for, transportation of heavy rocks, heavy, mm, equipments or heavy machinery. Machinery at that time did not exist. Heavy food bags, etc., from one place to another, right? So it might have come into their mind as to how we can make this process simpler, right? So that is how the genesis of boats or wheels occurred initially, right? Even now, somebody might be very motivated because of a loss of a close family member to a certain disorder, might instill that passion into somebody as to why they know that why what was the problem, why the treatment that is currently there could not work in their particular relative, right? And now they know from their personal experience that yes, this is the area that I want to work on, right? Similar goes for doctors, right, who are treating. they know that sometimes treatments don't work because diagnosis is very late, right? So they are also motivated by professional experience to basically find out biomarkers or diagnostic markers, that so that they can predict these outcomes much earlier, and so that therapeutics might also work better, right? So all of these is the answer for this one. Then we come to the fourth question, which is effective scientific communication helps to spread the discoveries or inventions to heterogeneous audience, or spread awareness about importance of science to a layman, or get critical inputs on shortcomings in the study, or all of these. Okay. So again, simple one, not very not very confusing, right? So the answer to this is all of this. So why do we need effective scientific communication, right? So that if we are discovering something, or if we need something to be discovered, we can convey that idea that we have to another person also who is maybe working in that field or not working in that field, right? Why do we need to convey ideas to people who are working in the same field as us? So that maybe you need to harness a different kind of expertise for your problem, right? So maybe you are a microbiologist or a molecular biologist who has taken on a subject such as diagnostics, right? To something related to a better detection strategy, right? So now for this better detection strategy, you want to use an imaging technique, for instance, right? And now this imaging technique, you have limited knowledge about it, right? But you need a physicist maybe, or a mechanical person to help you understand that particular technique better, for you to be able to optimize that technique as per your criteria. Or then maybe even if you get images, right, such that okay, now I have images of a diseased state and images of a healthy state, but there are very minute differences that I can see like this, how to process these images in such a way such that the clarity of these images is so that I can definitely make out differences between a diseased and a healthy condition. So in that case, you need a electronics and person, right? So that signal accumulation, noise, signal to noise ratios, and SNR is their expertise, right? So these are people who are not working in your area, but you need to effectively communicate to them so that they understand what is the problem that you have, and they can provide a solution that is relevant to your problem, right? Apart from that, we do need to spread discoveries and inventions to a heterogeneous audience, right? What if you were able to discover a small molecule or a very powerful drug, alternative, but you published it in a journal and nobody read about it, or no company came came forward to commercialize that product, and now it is a waste, right? Because nobody is getting benefited out of that particular product that was built, right? So a heterogeneous audience over here would mean people from the industry, people who doctors. So there should be a very good communication that should be established between doctors and researchers, right? So that they know that researchers know what is the areas that we need to work on, and doctors know that okay, this particular thing is has been tried for, and it might be a better alternative than the medicines that have are being given and are not working, right? So there are also, you need to approach multiple entrepreneurs, multiple companies, multiple funding agencies, and the governments for us and make them understand what you are working on, so that you can get grants or you can get funding for your particular project, right? So research is especially this biological research, even others, right? There are softwares that are worth lakhs, right? So you need a good funding for your research. So you need to be able to explain what you want to work on, why you work on that, why you want to work on that, and what impact it will have on the general public. So you need to be very good at communication. Also, uh, to it you also need to be good at it to spread awareness about importance of science to a layman, right? Okay. So this is question number 5. And you will see that this is from 2023. You will later see there is another very similar question like this from 2024 also. So this is a very, very hot topic from which questions generally always come, right? So the given image here represents one of the paradigms of a research project that defines the various steps one should follow while planning and executing any research work. Identify the options that correctly identify the image and the core of the shown image, right? So, what do we have to say? That what is this entire image? That should be your first answer. And what is the core of this image? That is this missing text over here in the center. That is your second option. So please go through it. We will discuss the answer then. Okay. So the answer for this one is, yeah, it's inquiry wheel. So this particular image represents an inquiry wheel. And the core of this inquiry wheel is to ask questions, right? So, what generally, how do we go about this wheel is that first we need to, like you, obviously it is a wheel, so it is an ongoing process. If we start from here, the first is observation, right? So if you observe something, you ask questions about it, right? Once you ask questions about it, you identify what is required, right, to be worked upon. That defines a problem, right? Once a problem is defined, you again ask questions. How will I solve this problem? Right? That is how questions are formed. Right? To solve this particular bigger problem, I will have to divide it into multiple smaller problems. Right? Those are the form questions. Right? So once that is done, what you do is you investigate what is already known, right? So if I do this particular experiment or if I do this particular study, this is already the already known outcome in similar diseases, right? So according to this, what will I expect in my disease, right? So after investigating the known, you will again ask questions and you will articulate the expectation, right? What do you expect to happen in your particular experiment, right? So once you articulate expectation, you again carry out the study, right? So now the only question that is left is, okay, this is what is expected, but what happens after you do it, right? So you will carry out the study. That will give you a certain outcome. Right. Now the question is how to interpret whatever you have gotten, right? So an unbiased approach is what should be used to interpret these results, right? And whatever observation you get out of these results should then be reflected on in the findings, right? Once you have completed your study, you need to communicate your findings, right? Both to the society and to the scientific community, right? Once you communicate, there will be some end to your study, right? And that will also open some new questions, right? So from your end, the study might have been completed, but it always has some open questions that are always remaining, right? Somebody else might read this literature and based on certain observations, they find a new problem, right? An extension of your study. So this circle goes on. So this is known as an inquiry wheel, and the core of it is to ask questions. Yeah. So this is the one that you guys have also seen in your lecture. Yeah. So question number 6 now is identify the option that describes the option in which a person begins with a known claim or broad opinion and then determines what follows, right? Judgment essentially begins with a hypothesis and investigates the possibilities within that hypothesis to achieve a conclusion, right? So, please go through the question again and tell what is the kind of what is the option that perfectly fits it? Is it inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning or inquiry wheel or none of these? So there are two statements that are given over here. Even if any one of the statement was given, I think the answer should have been achievable. Okay. So the answer to this one is deductive reasoning, right? What happens in an inductive reasoning? In inductive reasoning, you basically start with a statement, right? You have already looked at something, and based on that observation, you have already concluded something, right? Without testing it first. That is what is known as inductive reasoning. While in case of deductive reasoning, as is set over here, what happens is there is a judgment which begins with a hypothesis that this might be the case, right? When you say that this might be the case, you are always keeping a, a, a possibility that this may not even be the case, right? So there is always an option over there that this may happen or this may not happen, right? And okay, who is unmuted? Let me just mute everybody first. Yeah. Yeah. So the judgment essentially begins with a hypothesis that this may or may not be the case. Then there is a proper investigation of the possibilities within that hypothesis, and then a conclusion is reached, right? So that is what is deductive reasoning. Yeah, so this explains what inductive and deductive is and the difference between the two. So in inductive, there is a specific observation. Based on that observation, you recognize a pattern and you make a conclusion, right? There is no actual testing for that pattern or testing for that observation. But in deductive reasoning, what happens is there is an existing theory or a pattern, if you might say, based on that, we will formulate a hypothesis. Then we will collect data on that hypothesis, right? Then we will analyze that data and then we will see whether the hypothesis is true or it is false, right? Whether we follow the hypothesis or we reject it. Yeah. Then question number 7 says, given below are 4 statements, which one of them is likely to be a law, right? Statement number 1 is evolution occurs because of a phenomena called natural selection. B is every object will remain at rest or in uniform motion in a straight line unless compelled to change its state by the action of an external force. Option C is the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, right? And option D is every time you eat peanuts, you start to cough. You are allergic to peanuts. So please go through the options once. I want you to think about it, and then we will see which is the correct option. So let's come to the discussion, right? So this one is more likely to be a law, right? So why we say that is also something we are going to discuss. So this was a confusing question, I know. Um, we had a lot of requests as to multiple answers also being acceptable. I don't know what happened to that eventually, but this is what was reported as the answer, right? So, why we say that this particular one is more likely to be a law than the others are? Because okay, let us go one by one. Look at all the options, right? So, out of all these options, three of them are true, but one is actually false, right? So, the false one is every time you eat peanuts, you start to cough. You are allergic to peanuts, right? So this may be true for some people, and it may not be true to for some people, right? It might like if somebody has only encountered somebody who was eating peanuts and started coughing once, this might not be a logical way to think, right? Because most of the people that they know are allergic to peanuts, and that is why they start to cough. It might not always be the case. So, this is an incorrect option. The other two statements, however, evolution occurs because of a phenomenon known as natural selection. That is true. And sun rises in the east and sets in the west is also true. So is the statement that is B, right? It is actually one of the laws in physics, right? So why is this a law, but these two statements not a law? Because for any statement to be a law, uh, we should know two things about it: how this thing happens and why does it happen, right? Along with basically explaining how something is happening, it should also answer the question about why it is happening, right? So in this case, in physics, we know the answer to both how and why, right? So, how is this happening? It is already written in the statement. And why is this happening? Because of the, that has also been explained by Newton, right? So, there are some assumptions to it that the surface should be smooth, it should be at a particular environment, vacuum should be maintained, there should be no hindrance, etc., etc. So there are assumptions that have been taken into it. But if all those assumptions are true, this is the case, right? We know that this is a case. So we know both how this is happening and why this is happening, right? But in these two statements, evolution occurs because of a phenomena called natural selection, right? So we know how evolution is occurring. It is occurring because of a phenomena called natural selection. We also know what is natural selection now, right? But why is it occurring via this phenomena? Why not some other phenomena is something we do not know, right? So sun rises in the east and sets in the west. This is also something we know, right? We know how this is happening because the earth is rotating in a certain direction. But how is it rotating in that particular direction is something that we are not sure of, right? So these two are theories, right, which are true. But this B1 is the only statement that qualifies to be a law. So, coming to question number 8, which one of the following options is correct with regard to the type of communication that the image is shown uh, here represents? So A is verbal communication while B is non-verbal communication, or A is verbal communication while B is visual communication, or A is non-verbal communication while B is visual communication, or none of these. So actually, these kinds of communication, you will study more about it in week two. But last to last year, previous year's questions did have this question in the first week assignment. So that is why we have also kept it. So let us just look at the answer, right? So the first one is actually verbal communication, right? Somebody is speaking and the other one is listening, right? That is what it is communicating. And the other, however, is non-verbal communications, right? What are non-verbal communications? For instance, gestures are basically non-verbal communications. If somebody walks towards you and you just nod at that person without saying anything, that person might still nod back at you, which is a kind of acknowledgement that you have acknowledged that person and that person acknowledges you back, right? So that is a kind of non-verbal communication. If I go and hug somebody, right? So that is also a kind of communication that I am communicating that I am very affectionate towards that person. If somebody has just given a presentation and there is another person from the audience who goes and shakes their hand, it is also a kind of non-verbal communication that you did well, right? So there are gestures that are types of non-verbal communication. Then comes question number 9. Which one of the following represent visual communication? Right? Is it a bar diagram or an image showing human tissue structure or a text slide for acknowledgement or all of these? So all of these are actually visual communication, right? A bar diagram is also showing like without giving the exact values, it is showing what is the mean or mean and the standard deviation or the standard error that we have in our data or data set, right? Image showing a human tissue structure, again, it will give you insight about what the tissue looks like, right? If it is a longitudinal section, what is inside that longitudinal section, how are different cells arranged to make that organ. It is again a form of visual communication. And then text slide for acknowledgement, right? So that is another, because you are looking at the slide and then you are finding out what who the author or who the presenter is acknowledging. That is also a form of visual communication. Then comes question number 10. The statement, Rocky is a black dog who bites strangers. Every black dog I met bites strangers. Therefore, all dogs bite strangers, is an example of inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, common sense, or discovery. So, this again is an easy question. So we have already, in one of the similar questions, we went through what inductive and deductive reasoning is, and this one is an example of inductive reasoning, right? So based on a few observations, not a data set of observations that had been analyzed properly, based on only a few observations, there have been conclusion that has been reached, right? So that is generally not true, right? So that is this particular statement or set of statements is an example of inductive reasoning. Question number 11 says, which of the following statements is true with regard to the hypothesis? Our observation around the world as it is, a proposed explanation for a phenomena made as a starting point for further investigation, or a well substantiated explanation acquired through the scientific method, or all of these. So, which of these statements correctly describes what hypothesis is? Okay. So, option B, which is hypothesis is actually a proposed explanation for a phenomena made as a starting point for further investigation. Right? So, this is what the hypothesis means. Then, which one of the following is not an effective way to communicate science to non-specialist audience? Right? So, is it using technical terms or using analogies and visuals or keeping the story simple or avoiding jargons? Please go through the question. So, one of these ways that is given in the options is not an effective way to communicate science to non-specialist audiences. Yes. So the answer is using technical terms, right? Okay. Using technical terms, right? Because if you are basically using technical terms and avoiding jargons are just the opposite statements, right? So if you are not technicals means you are automatically avoiding jargons, right? So you should, in fact, in avoid jargons because if I start speaking in very technical terms about what I do in my PhD study, right? You will not really be able to grasp what I am trying to do or what I am trying to study about or what is my problem and what is the expected outcome I have foreseen for this particular problem, right? So, what I need to do instead to make you understand is to keep it simple, right? Keep the avoid jargons, keep the story very simple, and use analogy and visuals, right? So, it will really aid me if I could show some of the presentation, which just does not have a lot of technical data, but which has a little bit of background about what is the kind of struggle that we have in our field, the questions that are still not solved, and what is the kind of studies that have been done to solve those questions, what is the thing that is still lagging, and what is the thing that I'm working on. So that will really help. And drawing analogies, right? So there is a concept of starting from the known and then introducing the unknown, right? So that means that if I want to make you understand what is the situation I am in, I will probably first harness your feelings, right? So what I'll say is, what do you remember that one time when you were in that similar situation? Then I have drawn you to a particular incident that you already know about. And then I will explain about my incident, which I think is similar to that, so that you can understand it better, right? So using analogies and visuals really helps in effective communication, right? Then we come to question number 13. The image shown here is an advertisement for one of the consumer products. In this advertisement, the person with the white color coat represents social status or research and development or effectiveness of the toothpaste or all of these. So, a tricky question. Please go through it. Yeah. So, let's look at the answer. Yeah. So what does this person in white color coat represent? It basically represents research and development, right? So, yeah, it definitely does not represent social status, right? It is not like only this is a particular product that is only being promoted for use by the doctors, right? That is not it. So social status is not one thing that it is representing, right? Sometimes you have to go with option elimination to arrive on the correct option, right? So option A, you can directly eliminate. If you eliminate option A, option D is also automatically eliminated because since it cannot be option A, it can definitely not be all of these, right? Then you choose between B and C, right? Whether she is representing research and development or effectiveness of the toothpaste. No, effectiveness of the toothpaste is represented by the statement that is written over here, right? For, number one, toothpaste recommended by dentist, which is also the spelling is also incorrect. Anyway, this particular person in a white coat is actually only representing research and development. Yeah. Then we come to question number 14, which says, here is a standard example of a reasoning test used to predict the pattern for the empty box marked with a question. This is an illustration for deductive reasoning or invention or inductive reasoning or discovery. So you have gone through, if you have gone through this week's lectures that were uploaded on NPTEL, you will know what the answer for this one is, right? Yeah. So let's come to the answer for this question. It is inductive reasoning. Why is it inductive reasoning? Because over here there are some observations, and based on those observations, we are going to make a conclusion, which will be the answer about how this particular empty box is supposed to look like, right? Yeah. So inductive reasoning is a type of logical thinking that involves generalizations based on specific patterns. One such example is shown here. Then, based on your understanding of inductive reasoning, identify the best option to be included in the following chart, right? So, over here, based on inductive reasoning, we have to fulfill this chart, right? So, A, B, C, and D, the options are pattern, hypothesis, theory, and observation, or observation, pattern, hypothesis, and theory, or observation, pattern, theory, and hypothesis, or theory, observation, pattern, and hypothesis. So the options are a little confusing. Please go through them properly. Okay. So let's see what the answer for this one is. The answer is observation, pattern, hypothesis, and theory, right? So based on an observation, a pattern is basically chosen, it is seen, and based on that, we give a hypothesis, right? And that hypothesis becomes a theory. Option number 16. Which one of the following options correctly identifies the natural law? A natural law is an idea or a set of ideas that try to explain something, or a natural law is described by a sequence of events in nature that has been observed to occur without variation under the same conditions. Or a natural law is a general idea or principle of a particular subject, or none of these. Yeah. So the answer for this is the second option, which is it is described by a sequence of events in nature that has been observed to occur without variation under the same conditions, right? That is a natural law. Then we again talk about this image that is shown over here. Which of the following options is correct with regard to the type of communication that the image shown here represents? Is it verbal communication or visual communication, or both verbal and visual communication, or none of these? Again, you can go with option elimination to arrive at the most logical option, and that is also going to be the correct option over here, which is visual communication. So this is definitely not verbal communication, right? It is a signboard, it is not speaking out anything. So it is not a verbal communication, meaning it cannot really be verbal and visual, right? So the only options remaining is visual and none of these, right? Over here it is a signboard, it is for you to see, so it is a form of visual communication. Then, which of the following is an essential need for performing any research study? Is it asking questions, or analyzing and explaining the outcomes, or proposing a hypothesis, or all of these? Okay. So, another simple one. The answer for this is all of these, right? So in order to perform any research studies, we do need to ask questions. Based on that, we will find what are the questions that we will refine what are the questions need to be asked. Then we propose a hypothesis, and whatever experiments we do to confirm our hypothesis, we will analyze data generated from them and explain the outcomes, right? So the answer over here is all of these. The statement, bachelors are unmarried men. Raman is unmarried. Therefore, Raman is a bachelor, is an example of discovery or invention or deductive reasoning or inductive reasoning. Okay. So the answer is deductive reasoning, right? So this is another question that a lot of you might get confused in. But over here, you need to also see what the statements are, right? What are the given statements? So, bachelors are unmarried men. Now, this is a true statement, right? We know that that is true. Unmarried men are known as bachelors, right? And based on that true statement, uh, there is an observation that is being said. So, this could be a known statement. Based on that, there's an observation that Raman is unmarried. And after we have observed that Raman is unmarried, there is a conclusion after that that is coming, which is Raman is a bachelor, right? So it is not starting with Raman is a bachelor, right? It the conclusion of these first two statements is that Raman is a bachelor. So that is why it is a deductive reasoning. So deductive reasoning is the testing and the existing theories and hypotheses, which is general ideas, by collecting experimental observations or specific examples that put those ideas to the test. Hence, all other options are incorrect, right? Then question number 20 is, which one of the following is correct with regard to scientific communication? Right? Option A is disseminate the discoveries or inventions to a diverse audience, or disseminate knowledge about the significance of science to an individual with less scientific knowledge, or obtain crucial feedback on the limitations of the research, or all of these. Right? So which out of this is the correct option? All of these, right? So similar question we had seen a while back also. So these are all actually the correct option. Which one of the following statements correctly identifies the scientific hypothesis? Hypotheses are verifiable. It is a proposition, but the result may disprove it. It is based on limited data set, or all of these. You are seeing like every year there is a question about hypothesis also, but your options will not be the same, right? So you need to practice these like similar kinds of questions, or like even if you did not have questions, even if you had just gone through your lectures nicely, you will be able to solve it. But it is not like those school quizzes that we have, that this is something that you have been taught with, and exactly line to line, word to word is the question that is being asked from you. So that is no longer going to be the case, but it will be on the same concept, right? So the answer for this is all of these, right? Why? Because hypothesis definitely is verifiable, right? You will verify and you will find out whether it is correct, whether you approve it, or it is incorrect, or you disprove it, right? But it is also based on a limited data set, right? So there is some data you have based on which you have built a hypothesis, but now you need to gather more data to find out whether this limited data set was giving you the correct picture or it was giving you an incomplete picture, right? Then question number 22 is the inquiry wheel outlines the sequential stages that should be adhered to while strategizing and implementing any research work. Identify the option that correctly identifies the steps marked as A, B, C, and D in the schematic, right? So observing, then A, then forming the questions, then B, then articulating the expectation, carrying out study, then C, then reflecting on the findings, then D, and then back to observing. So, which one of these will be the correct options, right? So, please go through the options. I think it is a jumble between all these: defining the problem, interpreting the results, investigating the known, and communicating the findings. So, these four, where will they, land? I will give you a moment to look at the options for this one. Okay. So the correct option for this one is option A. That is, after observing, will be defining the problem, asking more questions, then forming the question, then investigating what is already known. Based on that, asking questions and articulating what is the expectation, then carrying out the study, then again interpreting the results of those studies, then reflecting on the findings, and then finally communicating those findings, right? So this is the inquiry wheel, and this is the correct option for it. So a research plan starts with defining problem, following the observations. The problem defined is then investigated and compared to the existing knowledge. After analyzing the results, the work is compiled and communicated for peer review and criticism to a suitable journal, right? So that is the normal process that is followed. Now we come to question number 3. I think this is the final one. Identify the options that presents the accurate among the following collection of words for the gaps in the given sentence. Dash reasoning aids us in formulating the dash and dash. So your options for these dashes are inductive, hypothesis, theories, deductive, and inferences. And these are the options that are given. Please go through the options and tell which one is the correct one. Also, this is a question in which more than one of them could be correct, right? So please try to find both of them or all three of them. Okay, so the answer for this one is option A and B, right? So either one of these will be correct. Uh, First one is inductive reasoning us aids us in formulating the hypothesis and theories, right? Or deductive reasoning aids us in formulating the hypothesis and inferences, right? So inductive reasoning helps us in generating hypotheses and theories, while deductive reasoning helps us in generating hypotheses and inferences. So that is it for the first part of the presentation, right? Let us just quickly switch to the part 2. Yeah. So part 2, I said, would be a quick recap of what you have already studied in this particular week. In this particular week's lectures. Along with that, wherever I felt there was scope for emphasis, right? That is what I have included in this particular presentation. So first, let us begin with understanding what is communication, because we are studying this particular course, professional scientific communication. So the first part should be for us to effectively understand what is communication in the first place, right? So communication takes place when one mind, just let me use my pointer, when one mind so acts upon its environment that another mind is influenced, and that in that other mind an experience occurs which is like the experience in the first mind and is caused in part by that experience, right? So what does this is basically a very famous statement that has been quoted by uh, a I.A. Richards from 1928, right? So in this particular statement, he wanted to make another person understand what effectively communication is, right? So what they mean over here is that I have something in my mind, right? Something that I want to convey to another person. So whatever I have in my mind has come is a part of my mind because of some experience that I have had, right? Maybe that experience was reading that, okay, today I had to take this lecture, right? Maybe that experience was something else. So I have to communicate something that has formed in my mind uh, as words or in some way to across to another person, so that a similar kind of experience is also registered in their mind, right? So for instance, one experience in my mind is knowing what an hypothesis is, right? So I know what a hypothesis is, but I have also experienced it sometime in my life in some lecture, through which I have gained that understanding about what is a hypothesis, right? Now I want to transfer on my experience to you so that you will also understand, or you will also effectively know what a hypothesis is, right? So I am just passing on whatever experience is there in my mind and creating another experience in your mind so that you will understand. That is basically communication, right? Also, there are different types of communication, right? So these types of communication are verbal, non-verbal, and visual, right? As I said, they will be a part of your coming week lectures also. But since there were questions in this week itself, that is why we have talked about it briefly over here. So these are the few types of communications: verbal, non-verbal, and visual communication, right? Apart from that, question number two that you should know about is, where do research ideas come from, right? Now, along with this question, why have I put up such a busy slide over here, right? Why is this so? Because research ideas come from everything that you are surrounded by, right? Be it some person who you are talking to, be it some TV series you are watching, be it some paper you are reading, right? So not just research ideas, it could just be ideas. So you are constantly thinking about newer and newer things because of the environment that you are surrounded with, right? So the genesis of research ideas is very, very broad, right? Still, we will try to sum it up. So, okay, just let me mute. Yeah. So this was a paper I have given the citation for that, if you want to go and read. It is a paper from December 2023 from Pacific Basin Finance Journal, in which Duncan et al. Have basically tried to explain where do research ideas come from, right? So they have talked about three stages of research idea generation, right? Research ideas arising, right? The first stage is the generation of this research idea. The second stage is research idea refinement, and the third stage is evaluation of that research idea, right? So the corresponding stage of the opportunity formulation process will have opportunity search process, the recognition of that opportunity, and then evaluation of that process. So the stage one, that is generation of this research idea, right? So how is research idea generated, right? First, we go through theory, right? There is some, there are different things that we
The
might
whole problem before is
go
how it
through to
started.
find
I
these.
don't want to tell. I don't want to go do research anytime.
Yeah, there are many different, literature or different experiences that or different data sets we might go through to find out literature gaps, right? One of them is theory, one other is measurement or methodology or analysis of these measurements and datas, or industry, right? So there are different kinds of literature uh, uh, literatures from which we can find gaps, right? That is the genesis stage of this research idea, right? So again, I would like to point out this was a finance journal, so the terminology might not be accurate for a science related communication, right? That also has, every field does involve some kind of analysis and you know communication and reporting of data sets, etc. So even though the language might differ a bit, you need to just grasp the concept over here. Stage two is uh, refinement of a research idea, right? For instance, if you had a research idea, that research idea may be, relevant for you to fulfill a particular literature gap, right? Now you need to find out, okay, you have an idea, okay, that can, if you can, answer that particular question, you will be able to fulfill a particular literature gap, right? But now, how will you solve that question is what you need to work upon, right? So you need to find a doable research method, right? You need to question and you need to find out how will you answer a particular question, what is the kind of technique you will you take, or what is the kind of approach you will use to answer that question. Then for some techniques, for instance, you will have to use some data that is already available, right? Even if I want to do a normal PCR, I should know the concept of a PCR, right? That is an available data, that this is how a PCR works. And then I have to use that particular data for me to design an experiment. True. So, or even for any other thing, right? Even if I want to cook a meal, right? I need to know that what are the different kinds of condiments that can go into something that I am cooking, right? Based on that, I will find out, okay, this is the correct balance for me, and this is how I will cook this meal, right? Then after that, you will publish these results, and based on that, maybe some other person will read that literature, find out what are the gaps, generate another idea to basically strengthen your research, right? That will happen. So to fulfill knowledge gaps in knowledge, there are two kinds of approaches that are possible. One is an adaptive research approach, the other is a creative research approach, right? So an adaptive approach is something that is already known. You are adapting that, you are slightly modifying it, and you are contributing for that particular approach to become better, right? Then there is a creative research approach. That this is what people generally do, but I have an idea that this can also be done in this way, right? Nobody else has thought of it before, but it can be done, right? So that is kind of a creative research approach. Then stage three is research idea evaluation, right? Once you are done with the refinement of your idea also, you need to finally come and process that idea, right? So what you need to do is first you need to engage the network and mentors, right? So if, for example, I have some idea for my research, I will speak to my lab mates, I will speak to my colleagues in the department, and I will also speak to my mentor, right? Because maybe they can tell me if there is a very, uh, you know, uh, uh, detectable flaw in what I am thinking, or if there is a way that I can avoid some mistakes that I might have done, right? Something that they are more experienced in, etc. Then I will seek review for it, right? So I will ask people around me to basically guide me that whether this is what I have thought of. Do you think that I will be able to do this in this particular way, or do you suggest some other approach, right? So there are multiple ways to seek these reviews, right? So some of them are to present your work in conferences, wherein there will be other people from your expertise who might have tried something similar, not succeeded, so or tried something similar and succeeded, so that they can guide you better, right? And you can present in seminars, workshops, or you can attend seminars so that you gain knowledge from people who are more knowledgeable about that particular topic. Then the formal internal university processes, such as you need to present your work, like before pursuing research on it, you need to present your work to other professors in your department, right? So that your hypothesis is basically validated, that okay, this is a good enough question, I think yes, you can work on it, or there is a major flaw in your question, I think you need to refine your problem, otherwise it will not help achieve your target, something like that, right? Or pre-registered researchers. Then you need to allocate dedicated time to reflect on that feedback that has been given to you, right? Then you have to rank and prioritize as to what you should do first, what can be done later. And then you should aim for high quality outlets, right? And that is how your research idea will be both evaluated and also simultaneously executed eventually, right? Yeah. So that was about research idea generation. Now, there is another concept that we went through this week, which was hypothesis, theory, and law. Right? So, what is a hypothesis? We have read about it. It is basically a statement that may or may not be true, but it is verifiable, right? So, you can do experiments to either accept a hypothesis or to reject it. Theory and law are very similar terms. Both of them are actually true. It has been proven to be true. But in case of theory, we know that this statement is true, and we know that how we are that why is it true, but we do not know how this particular thing is occurring. Sorry, we know that how this particular thing is occurring, but we do not really know why this particular thing is occurring, right? In case of law, however, it is a statement that has been proven true, and we also know why this is happening. Why whatever is happening, right? So the hypothesis, law, and theory. Hypothesis is prediction, idea, sometimes a question intended to be answered, right? Law is research statement that is proven generalized rule used to explain observations, theory, believed to be true, right? So when a theory is finally answered properly and it is it can become a law, and it is also explained that why this is happening, whatever is a theory, it finally becomes a law. What is theory? It is based on a hypothesis which could become a law but doesn't happen often, supported as long as there isn't enough evidence against it, right? So we know that there is enough evidence for it. It could eventually become a law, but there might also be some contradictions that remain, right? So that is it for all these three. Then comes another question, which is, can we use visual communication along with written communication when writing the methodology of a research proposal? Right? Is it possible? Yes, it is, of course, possible. Right? How is it possible? Like this. So, this is an example of this, right? Uh, it is an example of a Pierre J. Computer Science journal, right, by Sehri et al., wherein you can see that this is a visual representation of the methodology that they have used. So, only by looking through this representation, I can find out that there was some model that was built in which a lot of data was fed, right? These data were some biomedical image slices which were pre-processed. Then there was some AI that was trained, right? So there was some deep learning that was involved. This AI was trained for this particular data set or multiple of these data sets, and then these trained models were obtained. Now this trained model was loaded, and it can effectively do the testing wherein a person can be referred to as a healthy control or as a diseased person, and after the model is tested, we will evaluate the model for its accuracy on actual patients, right? So that is what was done by these people, right? So this was a visual communication along with the written communication to basically explain the methodology of a research paper. Now, this is another example for the same, right? It is from eClinical Medicine, wherein they have basically drawn a flow chart over here to explain their methodology. So, what is being explained over here? That there was a UK biobank of participants, right? These were the number of participants that were used in this particular biobank. If we exclude participants with dementia at baseline, then which was these many participants, stroke at baseline, which was these many participants, and no follow-up patients, which were these many patients, then we obtained 4,25,000 something patients which were eligible for analysis. Now these particular patients were divided again into healthy control and 5-year incident dementia patients, right? And then assessment was done accordingly, right? So we can This is actually a simpler way, because if all this had been written, all these numbers had been written in a paragraph, it would have been much difficult to follow, right? This is an easier approach to explain what the methodology is going to be. Yeah. Then, yeah, this was something that Sir has already shown in his slide, right? And it is a very, very realistic graph that was created, right? Whenever there is a new idea generation, there is this infancy stage. After a while, there is a rapid development of whatever has outcome has to come of it. But after that rapid development, there is a kind of plateau or maturity that is obtained, right? After that, you do need to modify your hypothesis or go in another direction, or add something to your hypothesis that will now explain what is the outcome that you were getting in this rapid development phase, right? And only if that is added or modified will you be able to correctly ask the correct questions again, and then there will be another phase of development and maturity, and so on, right? So there is always incubation and management of ideas, right? So it is a continuous step. Now I have kept examples for this, right? So an example for this is the infancy stage. uh, in a normal example could be that I have an idea, which is initial idea and work carried out on that idea, right? So, for example, my idea was gel pens write more smoothly than other kinds of pens, right? So that is my initial hypothesis also, right? I think that gel pens write more smoothly than other kinds of pens. This is my initial idea. Then comes rapid development. Now, in rapid development, what will we do? We will work towards proving the initial idea and collect data on it, right? So, for example, over here, it is going to be, we will test various types of gel pens against liquid ink based pens, ballpoint pens, pencil, fountain pens, etc. Right? Then we come to maturity phase, wherein we will, based on the data obtained, we will make observations and inferences, right? So over here, what will my response be? That the other questions that will arise is the hypothesis that I had, which is gel pens write more smoothly than other kinds of pens. Will the hypothesis be proven? Or will we have to modify the hypothesis for it to be correct? Or will hypothesis be nullified? That is, it will be disproven, right? So the observations based on the previous maturity, that is, this will be that gel pens work smoothly on good quality paper, but lose the battle on lower quality paper, right? If the GSM of paper is nice, gel pens will work very nicely. It will be very smooth. But if there is a rougher paper or a lower GSM paper, they will lose the battle, right? Some other pen might work better, ballpoint pen or something else, right? Then gel pens also tend to smudge on paper, right? So mostly what will happen is gel pens will smudge on this paper, and gel pens are unable to work on wet surfaces. Right, so the ballpoint pens, you can, even if the paper is wet, you will be able to write with it. But in case of gel pen, they will not even work on wet surfaces, right? So what will happen? I will modify hypothesis for it to be correct, right? So after modifying my hypothesis, my new infancy stage or initial idea will be that the gel pens write more smoothly than other kinds of pens if the paper quality is good and is not damp or wet in any case, right? So based on previous observations, I have modified my hypothesis, right? I am still saying that gel pens are more smooth, than other kinds of pens, but now I am also adding conditions to it, right? When will that be true? Whenever the paper quality is good and it is not damp or wet in any sense, right? Then I will have another phases of rapid development and maturity, right? Wherein I will test this particular hypothesis and I will find out uh, what is the actual outcome, right? So this was my initial hypothesis. Gel pens write more smoothly than other kinds of pens. But now I had to modify this hypothesis after I tested for it, right? I had to modify it for it to still stand true. So now my hypothesis finally was gel pens write more smoothly than other kinds of pens if the paper quality is good and is not damp or wet in any sense, right? Yeah. So after that, this is, I think, the last slide. It was just a question that was asked as a doubt in one of the previous discussion forums. This question is that critically review the image given here and identify the line which depicts the hypothesis, right? The line one is screen of Ramesh's laptop goes black and there is no noise coming from the laptop. So line two is what might have gone wrong with the laptop as the screen went completely black and it is no longer producing any sound. Line three is it is possible that the laptop shut down due to hard disk failure or the battery discharged completely, hence the laptop turned off, or the laptop entered hibernate mode. Line 4 is also if the battery is fully discharged, the laptop fan should also not work, right? So which of these four is actually the line that depicts the hypothesis? Right. So I think you will not have to read it separately. Line three out of all of this was depicting a hypothesis. Why? Because it was giving possibilities as to answer our question, right? That this might have occurred, or this might have occurred, or this might have occurred, right? Not saying that this is the only thing that could have occurred, that has occurred actually. They said this could have occurred, or even if this has not occurred, maybe it was this, right? So line three is actually the correct option. So that brings us to the end of this very short discussion session also. And I thank you all for attending today's lecture. Although I know that in the beginning there was some problem, there was some technical error on my part. Even right now, my camera on this particular device is not working. I will work on it. By next week, I will have a fully functioning system. And yes, I'll see you again with next week's lectures and previous year questions for those particular set of lectures. And I hope that you will do well with your assignments. If there are any queries, during the week, you can always go to discussion forum and post your queries over there. Um, uh, there is another TA for the course, and I, like me or sir, any three of us can actually answer your queries on the discussion forums. If I am unable to answer queries over there, what I always do is in my next session, I always include those queries in my presentation so that I can discuss about that over here. So, with that said, is there any question regarding today's class? Okay. So, if there is no question, I will just take your leave. Have a good day. Have a good time in this course also. I'll just stop the recording and end the session.